Hi everyone, welcome to my channel Bibbity Bobbity Books. My name is Ellie and this is going to be my horror recommendations list for beginners. So today I thought it would be fun to film a recommendations video for people who are beginners to the horror genre, because I feel like it's getting to that time of year where the nights are getting longer, it's getting a bit cooler, and we've got Halloween just around the corner. So I feel like it's the perfect time to pick up a spooky read. But I know that the horror genre can be quite intimidating if you're new to it, and it's quite difficult to know where to start with your horror journey. So I've tried to choose some books here that I think would be a perfect place to begin. I've tried to choose books that aren't too intense, because I feel like when you're new to horror you might be a little bit intimidated, not want something that's too scary. So I've gone for things that have the spooky vibes but aren't too intense, and yeah, I think all of these would make for a perfect place to start. So without further ado, let's just jump straight in with my recommendations. So the first author that I'd like to recommend to you if you're a beginner to horror is Grady Hendrix, because Grady Hendrix writes quite a lot of campy horror. They're quite funny, they're quite kooky, and they don't take themselves too seriously. So for that reason I feel like his work is really good if you're a beginner, because it's not too intense and they're just a fun time. And I've read quite a few of his books, but I think my favourite book that I've read of his is My Best Friend's Exorcism, and I would recommend that as a good starting place. This one is a possession story, and it centres in on two best friends. So one of the friends ends up getting possessed by a kind of devil or demon, and the other best friend is trying to save them. So of course you get all of the gnarly details of the possession and of the exorcism that's taken place to try and save this girl from the possession. So there are some gruesome bits, a little bit of body horror in there as well, but it's set in the 80s, so it has such a fun backdrop. There's lots of references to pop culture. The two best friends bond over their love of E.T. There's roller skating parties, and each chapter is actually given the title of a popular 80s hit. So I love that as well, the fact that you can kind of have a soundtrack to this reading experience as well, and each song is chosen because it kind of fits the vibe of each chapter. So the whole experience is really fun. It feels very nostalgic, it feels like a kind of 80s horror film, and there's quite a lot of humour in there as well, but also there are some horrific scenes included in there as well. So yeah, I feel like this is such a fun place to begin, and I would recommend it to you. Yes, it is really scary, but it also has a beautiful friendship at the heart of it, and I was surprisingly moved by the ending of that one as well. So while it is like fun, I do also feel like it does hit quite hard as well. So yeah, I really recommend that book to you. The next author that I want to recommend to you if you're a beginner to horror is T. Kingfisher, because again I feel like this author includes quite a lot of humour in her horror books, and that just lightens the mood a little bit. She tends to write character dialogue really well. There's often quite a lot of banter between characters, and it makes for a really fun and enjoyable experience. And yeah, there's quite a few books that you could start with if you're wanting to try T. Kingfisher, but I think one that I would recommend as a beginner to horror would be A House with Good Bones, because for me this is quite a cozy horror. So while it is scary, it has a really kind of crazy ending. It really escalates and gets wild towards the end of this book. It is also kind of comforting in a way, I think, because there is a little sprinkling of romance in there, there's humour between the characters and the dialogue, and there's also like an animal companion, and all of those things just tend to lift it a little bit and make it a little bit less intense. So in this story we follow our main character Samantha, who is returning to her childhood home to visit her mum, but when she arrives things don't quite feel right. Her mum has redecorated the place, she's painted all of the walls like a stark white, it's not very cosy, and her mum is acting very on edge and just a little bit off. So Sam, our main character, is trying to get to the bottom of what's going on, and I feel like that's all you need to know going in, but it's such a fun time. So yeah, I would definitely recommend that to you if you're looking for something spooky but not too intense. The next book that I want to recommend to you is a classic, and that is Women in Black by Susan Hill. So I wanted to include a classic on this list, and I've chosen this one because it's lovely and short, so it's not a huge investment, and I feel like it's quite easy to fall into this one. It is a classic, but it's not written in an overly flowery way, but it is still incredibly atmospheric, and it's just such a great example of an atmospheric ghost story. So yeah, if you're wanting a haunted house type setting, I think it would be hard to beat this one. So in this story we follow our main character Arthur Kipps, who is a solicitor, and he is called to attend the funeral of Mrs. Alice Drablow, who recently passed away. So he's going to attend the funeral and to sort out all of her affairs. And she lived in this house called Eelmarsh Manor, I think it's called, and it's this creepy house that's at the end of this causeway in the English moors. So it's a super isolated, creepy setting with the misty moors, and the causeway that leads to her house sometimes becomes flooded depending on the tides, so of course that leads to our main character becoming trapped in the house, and it's just so creepy and eerie. And our main character finds out that there is this superstition in the town. People are very frightened of this woman in black, who is this mysterious figure that will appear, and they think that she is a harbinger of destruction and doom, basically, and the story progresses from there. That's all you really need to know. But this one is so cozy. I feel like this is the perfect read if you want to just snuggle up by a fireside and just have a lovely ghosty story, and it's just so much fun. So yeah, I really enjoyed that one. But if you're a little bit intimidated by a classic and you want a more modern haunted house story, then I quite enjoyed The Whistling by Rebecca Netley. So again, this one has all of the atmosphere that you would expect from a ghosty haunted house story. In this one we follow a nanny who goes to a Scottish island to look after this child of this wealthy family. The child is called Mary, and when she arrives she realises it's going to be harder to connect with this young girl because Mary is actually mute. So for reasons that no one wants to explain, this young child doesn't speak. So our main character has a really difficult time trying to connect with this child, and again, I feel like that's all you really need to know going into this one. This one has a lot of classic tropes in it. So it's got, you know, creepy sounds happening at night, people in the window, it's got creepy dolls, it's got a slightly creepy child in it. So I feel like if you want the full haunted house experience, then this one might be a good place to start. And while people who are more familiar with the horror genre might find this one a little bit cliche, I think if you're new to horror, then you're just going to have a really fun time with this one. And yeah, I thought it was quite atmospheric and I did enjoy it. So yeah, that's a more modern haunted house story for you. The next book that I want to recommend to you is for you if you tend to enjoy found footage horror movies, or if you tend to be more of a thriller reader, because this kind of blends the two. And the book I'm talking about is When the Ghosts Call Us Home by Katja de Becerra. So this is a book that really surprised me. I didn't think that I was going to enjoy this one as much as I did, but I could not put it down. It's so fast paced and it's so compelling. So in this story we follow our main character, and when she was younger, when she was 12 years old, she actually starred in her older sister's amateur horror movie. So they filmed this movie at their old house, which is this creepy house on the seaside. And it became a cult hit. It became really popular, and then many years later the older sister who produced and filmed this amateur movie actually goes missing. So we're following the younger sister as she's trying to find out what happened to her sister, where she's gone, and she's kind of following these clues which all lead her back to the place where they filmed the movie when she was 12 years old. So our main character decides to take part in this documentary that is talking about the film that they filmed in the past. And she does that so that she can have access to the house where they filmed it. So she goes back, and when she's there she starts to remember things, and she starts to question whether some of the scenes were actually staged or if strange things really did occur and her sister was just filming sort of what was actually happening. I don't know if I explained that very well, but this is so interesting. It has that mystery at the heart of it to keep you hooked. It has a really fascinating sister dynamic, because what made this movie so popular was that our main character had very real reactions. So when they filmed it when she was 12 years old, her sister said that, oh, she wanted her raw reactions to things. So she would subject her to these scary situations so that she would look really horrified and really shocked. And that's such a messy dynamic. There's quite a lot of unresolved history between the sisters, shall we say. And yeah, it's just really interesting. It's really fun. It's a YA, so it's not too intense, and it's just a wild ride. So yeah, I would recommend this if you're looking for something that feels a bit more like a thriller but has horror elements in it as well. Okay, so next up I wanted to suggest a short story, because I feel like that's always a good way to start as a beginner to horror, because firstly, I feel like the horror genre lends itself quite well to a short story format, but also I feel like that's a really good way to try out different subgenres to find out what works for you without committing yourself to a big full-length novel. So yeah, there's lots of different short stories out there, but one that I particularly enjoyed was Below by Laurel Hightower. So this one was actually a Mothman retelling, so it uses that kind of myth in it, and I think it's a really fun example of more of like a monster horror. And it's lovely and short, and it kept me hooked from beginning to end, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So in this one we follow a woman who is caught out in a snowstorm. She's driving on the roads, it's really bad weather. She's following behind a truck driver who's trying to sort of help her along the road, but then something happens and the truck actually swerves off the road and crashes down a hill. And our main character is obviously very panicked. She doesn't really know what to do, and of course there's no phone signal, so she can't call for help. So she decides to pull over, get out her car, and to go down the hill to check and see if the truck driver is okay and if she can help him in any way. And yeah, the story kind of goes from there. I don't want to say too much. She goes down the hill, and she may or may not be alone. She gets the feeling that maybe something is following her, and that's yeah, that's the intro to the story, and it was such a fun time, so I do recommend checking that one out. And then finally, I feel like a good place to start with horror is with a short story collection, because again, you can try out different stories and things. You're not committed to a full-length novel, and it's just fun sometimes to have an anthology or a collection where you can just read one of the stories perhaps per night or something. So if you're fancying something spooky, you can just give one of the stories a go, and they're normally not very long, so you can get through them, you know, quite quickly of an evening. So yeah, there's lots and lots of different anthologies out there. One that I recommend to you if you're a fan of the TV show Black Mirror would be At Home with the Horrors. So this one has a lot of short stories in it that I feel like have the same vibe or the same message as Black Mirror. So if you're a fan of that TV show, then you might want to check that one out. Or if you want to try some classic horror authors and you don't know where to begin, I would recommend picking up an anthology like Dark Descent, which showcases a whole bunch of different authors, from Stephen King to Lovecraft to Edgar Allan Poe. I think Shirley Jackson's in there as well. So lots of really big names in horror, so you can give them a try, and I feel like that might be a nice place to start your journey, and it could be kind of a jumping off point, because then if you enjoy a particular story or a particular writing style, you can then go ahead and look up that author and maybe try some of their longer bodies of work. So yeah, that brings me to the end of this recommendations list. I hope that you found it useful. If you have any recommendations for beginners to horror, please do drop them in the comment section down below so people have more recommendations to find if they stumble across this video. And yeah, I hope you're having a fantastic day, whatever it is you are doing, wherever you are. Don't forget to like this video if you did like it, subscribe if you want to see some more from me, and I guess I'll see you next time with another video. Bye!